Hello friends, today we are going to learn about growth models. Let us first begin with the meaning of economic growth and sources of economic growth. Then concept of potential output and feasible output, and later the long run growth with the help of solo model. So friends, let us start with the introduction to growth. Growth in literal terms is defined as an increase in one's ability, that is, it denotes the increase in one's capacity. In economics, growth means ability to produce more output with available resources by either reallocations of resources or by enhancing the available resources with the help of technology, education, etc. We are going to learn about economic growth today along with various sources of economic growth and also understand what long run growth is. Let me define economic growth for you. It is a long term expansion of productive potential of the economy. Growth can be long term or short term. In both the cases, there is a slight difference. Let us understand the meaning of long run as well as short run growth. Let us begin with the short run growth. In short run, we are concerned with annual percentage change in real national output, which is also known as GDP. That is, economic growth is caused by an increase in aggregate demand. If there is spare capacity in the economy, then an increase in AD, that is aggregate demand, will cause a higher level of real GDP. Friends, understand that aggregate demand can increase for the following reasons, that is, lower interest rates, increased wages, increased government spendings, fall in value of sterling, which makes exports cheaper and increase quantity of exports, increased consumer confidence, which encourages spending, lower income tax, which increases disposable income of consumers and increases consumer spending, rising house prices, which creates a positive wealth effect and encourages homeowners to spend more. Wherein long run growth. Growth is represented by increase in potential GDP and thus the country's long run aggregate supply curve shifts outward. Long run is basically expansion of productive potential by enhancing the capacity of land, labor or entrepreneur with the help of technology or education. Now the question arises, how one shall decide if there is economic growth in the country? The answer is, to determine the level of growth, one need to check rate of growth considering the following points. Every biography has its own pros and cons. Hence, every economy, every factor of the given economy works differently at a given point in time. In the world of globalization, planning only for one's country is not sufficient. Other world economies also matter equally for the significant growth of the economy. Friends, let us now know what are the determinants of growth. Some of the main determinants of economic growth that are common for both developing as well as developed countries. Let's start with first, that is capital stock. Growth in physical capital stock, that is investment in equipment, tools or machines, etc., leading to a rise in capital per employee. It is also known as capital deepening. Second, labor force. With the improvement in education level, there is growth in the size of the active labor force available for production. The growth in the quality of labor can also attributed to skills. If the available human resources are educated with the required skills, the quality of labor increases. With increase in educational level, technological progress and innovation is achieved, thereby improves productivity, that is higher GDP achieved for per hour worked. Then comes a stable government is also the source of economic growth. This includes maintaining the rule of law and macroeconomic stability. Friends, we have understood the key determinants of economic growth. As mentioned earlier, economic growth shifts the production curve upward and hence there is a total shift in aggregate supply. Friends, understand, change in supply curve differs in long run and short run. Aggregate supply is the total value of goods and services produced in an economy. The aggregate supply curve shows the amount of goods that can be produced at different price level. Hence, we'll understand the factors affecting it in short run and factors affecting it in long run. In the short run, capital is fixed. Firms can alter variable factors of production such as labor. The short run aggregate supply is viewed as elastic because in short run, firms can increase output by getting workers to do so by doing overtime. In the figure, we can observe that short run aggregate supply curve has shifted to the left. This could be caused by rising oil prices or increase in cost of production. Thus, factors affecting the short run aggregate supply curve are price of raw material, cost of labor, levels of tax and subsidies. After short run aggregate supply curve, there is long run aggregate supply curve. The classical view sees aggregate supply curve as inelastic in long term. The classical view sees wages and prices as flexible. Therefore, in the long term, the economy will maintain full employment. That is, in full employment, we are using all our resources to its exhaustive level. That means the supply curve becomes vertical straight line. Now, we will see types of economic growth. Economic growth can be of three major types. First, balanced growth. As the name suggests, it is balancing growth between rural and urban, rich and poor, and eradicating imbalances between all the sectors of the economy. It plans the policies in such a way that there is balance between the sectors and within the sectors too. Balanced growth also targets to achieve internal as well as external balances, that is, it tries not to achieve disequilibrium in balance of payment. Second, sustainable growth. It means that the current rate of growth is not so fast that future generations are denied the benefits of scarce resources, such as non-renewable resources and a clean environment. It believes in achieving current growth without limiting resources for future generation. Sustainable growth is more preferred over balanced growth as it believes in achieving targets keeping in mind macroeconomic stability, financial stability and even environmental stability. Third is inclusive growth. This type of growth believes in expanding the horizon of growth achieved. That is, it believes in raising the median per capita income. Like balanced growth model, inclusive growth also tries to minimize the economical gap between poor and rich. It tries to improve opportunities for all the groups. Growth, as we have understood, is an increase in the total output of the economy for a given period of time. Output is bifurcated in two main types, that is, potential output and feasible output. Potential output can be described as what an economy can produce when all its resources such as workforce, equipment, technology, natural resources and others are fully utilized. Thus, potential output is an expected rate of growth in an economy within given period of time. Potential output is achieved when an economy challenges its limits and hence there is shift in the vertical AS curve towards right. Thus, we observe an increase in the supply. An economy that produces at its potential output can be called as working at full employment. Hence, with such possible increase in output also defines the potential growth of an economy. Then, feasibility output. The purpose of the economic feasibility assessment is to determine the positive economic benefits to the organization that the proposed system will provide. It includes quantification and identification of all the benefits expected. This assessment typically involves a cost-benefit analysis. This also involves questions such as how much time is available to build the new system when it can be built, whether it interferes with normal business operations, types and amount of resources required, dependency and development procedures with company revenue prospectus. Let us now learn the solo model. The solo growth model allows us a dynamic view of how economy is affected by savings over a period of time. Solo model of economic growth is a postulate of linking output to the input of capital and labor. There are certain assumptions of the model. First, one composite commodity is produced. Output is regarded as net output after making allowance for the depreciation of capital. There are constant returns to scale. In other words, the production function is homogeneous of the first degree. The two factors of production, labor and capital, are paid according to their marginal physical productivities. Then, prices and wages are flexible. There is perpetual full employment of labor. There is also full employment of the available stock of capital. Labor and capital are substitutable for each other. There is neutral technical progress. The saving ratio is constant. Friends, now we will understand the model. Given these assumptions, as there is neutral technical progress, the production function is y equals to function of k and L, where y equals to output, k equals to capital and L equals to labor. As we have mentioned in the assumption that there is constant returns to scale, hence we divide both the sides by L. Hence, output per worker is a function of capital per worker. On observing the slope of this function, we get the marginal product of capital per worker as MPK equals function of capital plus 1. It tells us the change in output per worker that results when we increase the capital per worker by 1. We begin with per worker consumption and investment. Kindly note that government purchases and net exports are not included in the solo model. This gives us the per worker national income accounting identity as y equals to C plus I. Given a saving rate, say S, and a consumption rate 1 minus S, we can generate a consumption function as C equals to 1 minus S into Y, which makes our identity, Y equals to 1 minus S Y plus I by rearranging it, I equals to S into Y. So, investment per worker equals savings per worker. The solo model long run equilibrium occurs at the point where both Y and K are constant. These are the endogenous variables in the model. The exogenous variable is S. Now, we will study steady state equilibrium. By substituting function of K for Y, the investment per worker function I equals to S into Y becomes a function of capital per worker, that is I equals to S into function of K. The investment required to maintain capital per worker K depends on population growth N and the depreciation rate D. This depreciation investment per worker, that is DK, is added to NK, the investment per worker, to maintain capital labor ratio for the growing population. That is, change in K equals to I minus N plus DK. Substituting for I gives us change in K equals to S into function of K minus N plus DK. In the figure, it is given that if our initial allocation of K were too high, K would decrease because depreciation exceeds investment. If our initial allocation were too low, K would increase because investment exceeds depreciation. At the point where both K and Y are constant, it must be the case that change in K is considered as equals to 0, or S into function of K is equals to N plus DK. This occurs at our equilibrium point K star. At K star, depreciation equals investment. Thus, Solo model shows that the growth process is stable. No matter where the economy starts, forces exist that will push the economy over time to a steady state. We know that steady state is at the point where S into function of K is equals to N plus DK. What happens if we increase savings? This would increase the slope of our investment function and cause the function to shift up. This would lead to a higher steady state level of capital. Similarly, a lower savings rate leads to a lower steady state level of capital. This can be explained with the help of a figure where K star is the steady state capital per worker and Y star is output per worker when the S into function of K curve intersects the N plus DK curve at point E. An increase in the saving rate from S to S1 shifts the saving curve SFK upward to S1FK. The new steady state point is E1. When the saving rate increases from S to S1 with no change in the growth rate of labor force N, the capital per worker will continue to rise K1 star, which will raise output per worker to Y1, and so will the growth rate of output increases. Summarizing today's session, in this session, we learnt about economic growth, its various determinants and types. We also learnt about Solo model. The Solo growth model is a dynamic model that allows us to see how our endogenous variables, capital per worker and output per worker, are affected by the exogenous variable savings. We also saw how parameters such as depreciation enter the model, and finally the effects that initial capital allocations have on the time paths towards equilibrium. Thank you.